You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. The next week was good, mainly because of karate. I was training for an amateur tournament in Columbus, so I stayed after class every night for an extra hour of studying, and my teacher almost wore me out. I'd go home, feeling exhausted but great, eat dinner, watch the Davis game or read, and go to bed. Then, on Saturday, when I returned home from karate around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Jenny's friend Angela was sitting on my porch. For a moment, I considered driving straight past the house, and then I thought, damn it, I can't keep dodging people. She smiled sweetly at me as I approached her and said, "Hey, Nick, can you buy the girl a beer?" "Sure, Angie, if you don't mind being next to a sweaty guy while you drink it." "I think I can handle it," she said with another smile. We went inside and drank beer, chatting about nothing in particular. Like I said, I've always liked Angela. She was a short, curvy brunette, the complete opposite of Jenny, but like Jenny, outgoing and cheerful. Early on in our marriage, Jenny and I hoped that maybe Angie and Davis would get together because we liked them a lot, but they weren't really right for each other. They teased each other in a friendly manner, but never met. Either way, I didn't mind Angela being there. She was funny and a joy to watch. But I couldn't help but wait for the other shoe to drop. There was no way this sudden visit was about nothing but Jenny. When we finished our beer, I said something about this. "As nice as it is to see you, Angie, there must be some reason for you to stop by. Care to tell me what it is?" She blushed and lowered her eyes for a minute. "You might think it's because of Jenny, Nick, but it's really not. You know I like you too. I always thought I was friends with you too, not just with Jenny. I missed you too. When she left, I probably felt like I should stay away, out of loyalty to her or something. Now she was looking straight at me. But in the end I thought, screw it, Nick is my friend too. Why the hell can't I go to him? And here I am." I looked at her suspiciously. "So it's really not because of Jenny? You're not trying to figure out how to get her back, are you?" Angela looked a little worried, but held my gaze and said, "I was just hoping that we could spend time together, as we are used to." I won't say that I believed her. I'm just not that gullible, Maybe there was once, but not since nightmare number 1. But I didn't insist. "Okay, Angie, how about I take a quick shower and then we can go have lunch?" And that was the start of some really strange but really enjoyable weeks. The next week, Angela came twice more, and the following weekend we went to the movies and to dinner. True to her word, she didn't mention Jenny at all, didn't pry into my feelings or my current love life, which, of course, didn't exist. Instead, we acted almost like buddies, much like me and Davis, I think, except Angie was prettier and smelled a lot better. Angie loved baseball, so we watched a few games on TV and, at her request, I showed her some of the fancy karate moves I was learning. I told her about the upcoming tournament and random things at my job, and she seemed very interested. We talked about other things, such as Angie's work and her family life. We just got to know each other better, and I gradually became a little less suspicious. No, that's not true. Let me try again. I no longer suspected that Angie would come to me to persuade me to get back together with Jenny, but at the same time, I became more suspicious. I mean, if she didn't do it, then what did she do? I loved being with Angie, but why did she spend so much time around me? And everything was complicated by the fact that she was beautiful and sexy. She looked good and smelled good, and she really enjoyed my company. I'm only human, and I haven't been with a woman in almost 10 months. I began to realize that the feelings I had for her were much more than friendship, but I did not know whether they were purely lust or something more complex. Before I could figure out what I was feeling and what to do about it, everything came to mind in a way I didn't expect. Angie invited me to dinner Friday night at her house, and I assumed it would be casual, as we had done several times before. But when I got there was a tablecloth with candles on her kitchen table. The lights were dim, And Angie herself was amazing. No jeans or sweatshirt. She was wearing a short black skirt, tights, and a pale blue sweater that hugged her and really showed off her cleavage. Her hair was loose over her shoulders. "Oh my God, Angie, you look amazing! Are we going to some fancy party you forgot to mention? If so, then you'll have to fight off guys with a stick." She blushed and looked very pleased, but all she said was, "I just wanted to dress up a little tonight, that's all." At first, I felt uneasy. I was sure that something was going on, and I had a hard time believing that the most obvious conclusion, Angela was going to seduce me, was actually the right one. We talked nervously for a few minutes, but then we calmed down, had dinner, and enjoyed each other's company. Usually she and I preferred beer, but today she brought a bottle of red wine. It wasn't anything with a screw cap, but one of those $50 bottles of Chateau Leblanc that the guys at the liquor store are always trying to get you to buy. It tasted great, but I'm far from an expert. We were washing the dishes together, as we always do when we eat dinner, and I noticed that Angie was standing awfully close and managed to lightly touch my thigh, pretending that nothing was happening. Then she led me into the living room, turned on the music, and sat me down on the sofa. I knew I had to say something, so I just went ahead. "Angela, I'm having a great time, but I need to know what's going on, okay? We've been talking for a few weeks now, but it's like this." She stopped me by placing a finger on my lips. "Don't talk, okay, Nick? Just shut up. I've waited a long time to do this." I watched her carefully, with some surprise. She looked nervous, but determined, as she leaned in and kissed me tenderly. The kiss was amazing, and I was in no hurry to interrupt it. When she pulled away, she smiled shyly at me and then kissed me again. This time, it didn't take long before her arms wrapped around me tightly, and we embraced passionately. Like I said, Angie is beautifully built, and like I said, I haven't slept with anyone in a very long time. And as I said, I felt more and more tenderness and lust towards her, and like I said, she was wearing a sexy outfit, and like I said, we just had a romantic candlelit dinner and lots of wine. And like I said, she hugged me pretty hard. So don't bullshit me, okay? I had a beautiful girl in my hands, ready for anything, and I went for it. I hugged her, kissed her, stroked her back, and said in a quiet voice how beautiful she was, and then ran my hand over her chest. As I was caressing her, she moaned and moved closer to me, so I assumed everything was okay. A few minutes later, I was almost laying on the couch with Angie on top of me, and the foreplay continued beautifully. I carefully slid my hand under her skirt and had fun stroking her ass. Angie found it difficult to breathe between kisses. Honestly, I can't say I didn't even think about Jenny. I knew all too well that the only other woman I had been with for so many years was Jenny, and even my pleasure and excitement with Angie had not driven my unfaithful wife completely from my thoughts. But, on the other hand, thoughts about Jenny didn't bother me either. I was very focused on Angie and how much fun we were giving each other, and I was looking forward to what seemed like obvious next steps. There seemed to be only two questions: here, on the sofa, or in the bedroom. Imagine my surprise when Angie suddenly pulled away from me and looked at me sadly, tears filling her eyes. Before I could say a word, she jumped to her feet, stood over me, and said, "Nick, I'm so sorry. I can't do this." Confused, wondering if I had missed some sign of trouble, I stood up and walked over to hug her tenderly, trying to start something to say. "No," she exclaimed, retreating from me. "No, Nick, it's not you. It's not what you did. It's just me. I never meant—" She fell silent and began to cry. Looking at me through her tears, she said, "Could you just leave, please? I am so sorry." And she cried even harder, covering her face with her hands, just standing in the middle of the living room. I tried to hug her again, if only to calm her down, but she shook her head furiously and ran into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Confused, I just waited a few minutes. When she didn't come out, I went to the door and knocked softly. Her timid voice came from behind the door. "Yes, Nick, I'm sorry." "It's all my fault." Completely confused, I took my coat and headed home. Davis sat with me in the living room. "I don't know, old man," he said. "It's not very clear to me either." She didn't give you any explanation? I shook my head. All I can think about is that we're in too much of a hurry, or that she feels some kind of damn loyalty to Jenny. But what really drives me crazy is that she won't talk to me about it. This week I probably left her 10 messages. Very gentle, unobtrusive, you know? But she never called me back. Damn it, Davis, I don't deserve this. He smiled at me, raising an eyebrow. Ah, no one deserves this. And you especially don't deserve this. You deserve a parade of women, all of whom are hot for you, and none of which can be understood. I snorted. I've never met one of them, let alone a parade. What are you going to do? Nothing yet, I answered. I have a tournament at the end of next week, and I don't want to make a complete fool of myself. When I get back, maybe I can get Angie to talk to me and find out what the hell is going on. I won 5 out of 8 fights and finished 9th in my division. Besides being completely exhausted, I felt pretty good when I got back from Columbus. I had a busy weekend where I did nothing but eat, sleep, and do karate, and it was great. I hardly thought about Angela and even less about Jenny. More than ever since my wife left me, I felt that perhaps there was a chance that I would survive this nightmare and be able to rebuild my life. That's great, buddy. Davis congratulated me when I called him. And think what a weakling you were just a few months ago. Even I could beat you. Yes, in about 2 cases out of 10. Anytime you want to try again, buddy, just let me know. No way, buddy, now that you have a powerful black belt, you'll make fire out of me. But I can still outsmart you. We exchanged a few more friendly jokes before hanging up, and I thanked the gods once again for allowing me to have such an amazing friend. Especially last year. A couple of days later, I decided to go to Angela after work and persuade her to meet with me. She ended up doing this to me, and I got tired of leaving phone messages that were never returned. I rang the doorbell of her apartment and waited. A moment later, I heard her footsteps approaching, and then she must have looked through the peephole. Sorry, Nick, I don't see you. Her voice sounded a little muffled from behind the door. Well, Angie, looks like I'm in for a long night. I brought a folding chair with me, and I will sit here in the hall until you give me permission to come in and talk to you. If you pass by me in the morning, I will be here again tomorrow when you return from work. You'll have to get used to seeing me every day. There was a long pause, a very long pause, and then I heard the chain being removed and her opening the door. She was wearing jeans and a black AC/DC t-shirt. She was barefoot and must have just washed off her makeup. She looked like she was about to cry. She looked absolutely beautiful. I realized that I had not seen her for almost a month, and my heart began to pound. How about this? I thought. My heart is racing, and this is not for Jenny. Angie, you need to talk to me. I don't know what happened, what I did to scare you away, but please give me another chance. You are very important to me. Can you imagine what it's like to leave me after everything that happened? What happened to me and Jenny? I'm so sorry, Nick. I guess I didn't think about it. Come in and bring this stupid chair, she added with a slight smile. She brought us a couple of sodas, and we sat in her living room, me on the couch and her on the chair opposite me. All I ask, Ange, is that you tell me what went wrong. Was it me? Have I caused you any pain? She shook her head vigorously. No, nothing like that. It was never you, Nick. Nothing like what you did. I always felt good with you. She leaned forward. What I have to tell you is a long story, okay? And it will be difficult for me to say. Therefore, you must promise that you will listen to everything to the end and will not get angry. I've never seen her so serious. I promise, Angie, although I can see from your face that I won't like it. No, that's not true. She looked out the window for a while and then turned back to me. Nick, Jenny is in the middle of it all, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you want to know the truth, you will have to hear about it too. I won't pretend that I was happy. In fact, I felt my stomach drop, but I just nodded and waited for her to continue. And what followed, God knows, was another incarnation of nightmare number 1, as if I hadn't suffered enough already, going through all this. Angela told me about Jenny's fucking affair with that idiot Alec. Only she didn't call it an affair, of course. She explained that Jenny really fell in love with this guy, like I told you. She really thought he was right for her and that they would live happily ever after. Only it seems everything turned out completely wrong. At first, being with Alex seemed much more exciting than living with me. He was a handsome actor, loved to dance, have fun, and stay up late, and life was a crazy fun whirlpool. It's hard for any couple's routine to compete with that. But Alec was a complete idiot. He was hypertrophied, emotional, and rather unbalanced. He couldn't stick to any kind of routine, couldn't be where he said he would be half the time, and in his wild mood, swings began to insult Jenny. According to Angela, at first it wasn't that bad. He just screamed from time to time, although sometimes he got so worked up that Jenny hid in the bathroom behind the locked door. But after a few months, their fights became so intense that he even hit her a couple of times, and Jenny came to Angela's apartment to spend the night, scared half to death. Jenny finally began to realize that she had fallen in love with a fantasy, that married life had become a little boring, and that she attributed the dullness of the routine to me, not seeing that no marriage could compete with the excitement of something new. She finally realized what a terrible mistake she had made in thinking she could find magic with a petty, immature asshole like Alec. It was clear from the very beginning, I interrupted bitterly. I sat quietly, listening to the story, just as I had promised Angie, but it was getting harder and harder. I was almost ready to rush to the door. Angie saw this and quietly said, "Nick, you promised." I nodded and tried to relax. She should finish soon, I told myself. Anyway, Jenny moved out of Alex's house and rented her own apartment. And that's when she started talking to my mother and trying to contact me again. I knew the rest of the story, or at least I thought I knew. But no, of course there was something else that could ruin everything even more. How could I have thought that things would be different? Angie sat down next to me and took my hand. "Nick, please don't be angry with me. I may be the worst person in the world, but I did what I did because I care about Jenny and about you." I looked at her with concern. "What now?" "After Jenny broke up with Alex, she was determined to get you back. She just knew that if you gave her a chance to talk to you, she could make you understand how much she loved you, that she would do anything to make amends. When you told her to leave on the day she finally met you, she was completely devastated. She cried for weeks. I was very afraid that she would do something to herself. I almost thought it was a shame she didn't do that. But I realized that Jenny's suicide would be the final knife in my back, feeling guilty all my life, even though it was her fault. So I was glad that she at least spared me the horror. She kept thinking that there must be a way to make you understand so that you will give her another chance. We talked about this for hours. I just listened patiently as she repeated it over and over again. And then she came up with this idea. Angie squeezed my hand tighter. "Nick, you have to promise me you won't explode, okay?" I nodded, gritting my teeth and waiting for what would happen next. "Jenny thought that if you also had an affair, it would be easier for you to forgive her for what she did. But she knew from your mom that you weren't dating at all. And then one night she came to me and asked, no, begged me to seduce you." I let go of Angela's hand and jumped to my feet, staring at her. "So that's what it's all about. All these weeks hanging out, being buddies, having a good time, and then a tight sweater, candles, a bottle of wine. No, Nick, please let me finish. Old Nick wasn't fooled, not fooled enough. So let's do it to him again, right?" By then I was almost screaming. "Nick, listen!" Angie shouted to me with tears in her eyes. "But you promised." I was furious, but I closed my mouth and sat in a chair as far away from her as possible. And I waited for her to continue. I told her it was a terrible idea. It was unfair to you to take advantage of your misfortune. Not to mention that she asked me to become a seductress, and I hated the very thought of lying to you or playing some kind of game. You are my friend, and I told her it would never, ever work. But she begged me. Nick, she begged me. She fell to her knees in front of me, cried, and said that this was her only chance to get you back, that I was her best friend and should help her, that she had no one else to turn to. And Nick, I knew how much you loved her. Or at least how much you loved her before. You were always so crazy about her and so kind to her, and I thought maybe it would be useful for you to find a way to get her back. So I told her I'd try. I'd like to drop by and chat a little and see what happens, but I didn't promise her anything. Angie's voice became very quiet. Part of the problem was that I was so attracted to you. You know, I never thought about you like that. From the day we met, you were Jenny's boyfriend and we've always been great friends. But now that you were apart, I couldn't help but think about what it would be like. So I came to you and we started hanging out and, well, Nick, we had a great time together, isn't it? And nothing romantic happened. And I kept telling myself, I'm doing this for Jenny, but I have to take it slow, lay the groundwork, and not rush. I didn't want to ruin everything. But the truth was that I fell in love with you. She spoke even more quietly. I just liked being around you. These casual dinners, or watching TV together, or whatever we did, I was so happy, Nick, and I didn't know what to do except that I wanted it to continue. But Jenny became more and more impatient, asking when I was going to put you to bed. And I felt so guilty. I felt guilty because I wasn't honest with you, and I wasn't honest with her either. The worst part is, if we slept together, would you really go back to Jenny? I didn't think so, but I had to face the fact that I didn't want this to happen. She looked at me pleadingly. And there I was, Jenny pushing me to seduce you. And there I was, desperately wanting you, but for me, not to help her. And you were so sweet and cheerful, such a good friend. I started avoiding Jenny and didn't call her back, because I just couldn't tell her the truth that I wanted you for myself. It was easier not to talk to her. That night, with candles and wine, I decided that I would take you to bed. Later I'll worry about why I did it. But then when we kissed, and you touched me, and I was so excited. Damn it, Nick. I wanted you to make love to me. I wanted you to be my lover. I still want it. But I made that promise to Jenny, and I also knew that I wasn't being honest with you, and I suddenly felt like my head was going to explode. I just knew it wasn't right, even though I wanted you so much. And I just had to stop. We sat in silence. Angie was crying quietly, and I was clenching my fists so tightly that I was afraid that my nails would pierce my palms until they bled. I knew what Davis would say if he were there, and it almost made me laugh, hearing his voice in my head. Jesus Christ in a hot air balloon. We sat in silence for probably more than 5 minutes. Then I stood up and said, "What a story, Angela. Another chapter in the book about how women pulled Nick Perry, man. What should I call it? The same nightmare, only on a different day. This seems to fit quite well." I'm really sorry, Nick. Her head was down and I could barely hear her. Me too, Angie. I turned around and went home, taking my stupid folding chair with me. I don't know, buddy, Davis replied. I need a little more information. We sat in my backyard, each with a beer. Just answer the question, Davis. Is this my third nightmare, or just a continuation of nightmare number 2? I think it depends on the circumstances, Nick. Tell me this. Are you feeling hurt and angry about Jenny's new story? Because she found a way to mess with your head again? Or are you so upset because Angie deceived you? What if I say that it's both? I thought for a moment. I think it's all because of Angie. Believe it or not, Jenny's role isn't that bad, because that's what I expected from her. She wants what she wants, and how she gets it doesn't really matter to her. I have long ceased to highly value her ethical standards. I laughed. Then, Davis said, this is definitely your third nightmare, because the first 2 were Jenny's doing, and this one was Angie's. Glad we cleared everything up. Would you like another beer? Of course, he said. And after that, let's go eat. We had finished half the pizza and we're now sitting back in our chairs with satisfaction, watching the pretty waitress's ass move around the restaurant. So, how are things going with Angie now? Have you talked to her? Never. She's left me several messages over the past 2 weeks, all discreet, just how sorry she is. I just didn't want to call her back. Why not? I thought a little. I think it's because I don't know what to tell her, Before I call her, I feel like I should know how I feel, what I want to happen. And now, I don't know anything at all. I mean, she lied to me, right? She indulged Jenny. But on the other hand, when she was close to going through with it, she retreated. She stopped herself. This should be worth a few points. And when I finally got her to talk to me, she told me the truth, even the part that makes her look bad. And the thing is, I miss her. I keep thinking about how much fun it was hanging out with her. Not to mention how incredible she looked in that blue sweater the night we almost made it. I certainly wouldn't mind finishing what we started. But can I trust her? Is there any reason to believe that I can count on her more than my bitch wife? Davis looked at me and said, "It's time to go, boy. When you start talking in circles, I know it's time to take you home." 3 days later, Jenny came to see me. Just like that. Out of the blue, without warning. Was this nightmare number 4, or just Appendix A to Nightmares number 1 or number 2? By this time, I had already lost count. It was about 8:30 p.m., and I was washing the dishes after dinner. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, she was there. If I hadn't been so startled, I might have closed the door in her face, but I just froze. "Hello, Nick," she said in a small voice, like a little girl. "Can I come in and talk to you?" I silently stepped back and let her into the living room. We sat opposite each other, saying nothing. My heart wasn't pounding. My palms weren't wet. This time I just felt cold and some kind of emptiness. It was like meeting a person from a painful but distant part of my past. And I realized that I was further along in the process of getting rid of Jenny than I thought I would be. "Would you like a drink or a cup of coffee?" "Some water would be great, thank you." I brought her a glass of water and another for myself. We sat for a while longer. I knew one thing. I wouldn't say a word. She came in with something on her mind. I was going to wait to see what the hell it would be this time. "Nick, I haven't seen you for a long time. Since the day I was here with you and Davis. I was waiting. I know you spent time with Angie because she told me about it from time to time when we talked." She looked at me, clearly hoping that I would prompt and help her, but I just watched her. But for some reason, Angie hasn't been answering my calls lately. I don't know what's bothering her, whether she's mad at me or what. Silence again. Her gaze became even more pleading. "Nick, are you dating her? Are you a couple or just hanging out together, as friends?" Her tone was a little pleading. "I don't think it's any of your business, Jenny. You and I are no longer together, and what happens in my public life is private." She looked offended but nodded. "Yes, I see that." Then she took a deep breath and rushed forward. "You know why I'm asking, don't you? I still love you, Nick, more than I ever thought I would. After my terrible mistake with Alec, I had a lot of time to think about everything I threw away. Baby, all I want is you again. I will do everything to make up for the pain I caused you. God, what an idiot I was. But now I know it, honestly." I wondered why my heart wasn't pounding, why I felt relaxed rather than tense. "Jenny, I'm just not going to date you again. You say you thought about your mistake, but I don't think you don't realize how much you destroyed me." Impulsively, I made a decision. I woke up. "Come with me, okay? I want to show you something." Puzzled, she followed me as I walked up the stairs. Soon we stood in front of the closed door of what used to be our bedroom. "In the first 2 weeks after you left, I almost went crazy." I moved into the guest room, but kept coming back to our bedroom and doing things with it. Spill out your feelings. Then I got tired of it and just stopped. I haven't been in this room for a long time, but I think that when you see this, you will understand how your betrayal made me feel. I opened the door, turned on the light, and stood aside to let her in. I heard her gasp, "Oh God," and looked around the room that had been the bedroom all our married life. On one wall hung Jenny's sexiest red nightie. It was actually a copy I bought since she took the original with her when she moved. Right where her heart would have been if she had been inside, The steak knife went deep into her nightgown and into the wall. The candles that had been on the bed the night I found her with Alec were broken into pieces and scattered haphazardly on the floor. Wax marks marked where I had repeatedly thrown them into the walls. There were pieces of our wedding album lying everywhere. I tore it apart, page by page, then tore the pages and photographs into pieces and scattered them haphazardly. There were several deep cuts in the walls at about ankle level, where I hit hard with my boots. I watched as Jenny looked around the room, taking in the ugliness and destruction. As she turned to me with obvious shock on her face, I said, "I bet you didn't know I could get that angry, did you?" I didn't know either. They say that during times of stress, you learn something new about yourself. Well, I discovered how much hatred and rage I had inside me, ready to burst out with enough provocation. And it's your doing, Jenny. There was an expression of sadness on her face that I had never seen before. I felt that perhaps she was beginning to understand how much she had hurt me. In a quiet voice, she said, "Oh, Nick, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry." She slowly approached me, wanting to hug me, but I said, "No, Jenny, I don't think so." And without saying another word, I turned and walked down the stairs. Almost 10 minutes passed before she came down and sat with me in the living room. "It's really over, isn't it?" I nodded to her. "You killed everything, and returning to life together is simply impossible." She began to cry, looking at me, her shoulders shaking. After a couple of minutes, she stood up, still crying, and left the house. "I really want you here, Davis. Are you my friend or not?" He gave me an irritated look. "Do you really think that I would have endured your problems all these years if I had not been your friend?" "Deliver me," he said with a snort. "I just don't understand why I need to be around while you're talking to Angela." "For luck, maybe," I said. "Do you remember how Jenny came to our house? It was your idea to be here with me, and thank God it was so. I really needed you. So, call it a stupid superstition, kid. Just don't go, okay? At least stay here for the first few minutes." He sighed with deliberate resignation, but I knew he would stay. We watched another half of the inning, and then when the doorbell rang, I turned off the TV and went to answer it. "Hi, Angie." "Hi, Nick," she said shyly. She looked so beautiful that I wanted to grab her, but I didn't. She was wearing a white skirt and a sleeveless knit top with barely visible cleavage. Very attractive, but not at all provocative or slutty. And her hair was shiny and gorgeous. I knew she wasn't a beauty in the same class as Jenny, but I didn't care. She looked lovely. "Hi, Davis," she said, smiling at him as she entered the living room. He stood up and kissed her on the cheek. "Hello, Angie." I asked Davis to stay while we talked, at least for a while. "Nick, I don't care who's here to listen to my apologies. I'll do it anyway. I'm just really sorry." "Shh," I interrupted her. "I know you're sorry. You said it when we talked at your house. And you've said it in how many phone messages since then?" I smiled at her. "So let's talk about what happens after I'm sorry. First me, then you, okay?" Angie nodded. "Okay, number 1. Jenny and I are done. I don't even hate her as much as I used to, but I will never go back to her. Is it clear?" Angie nodded again, smiling slightly. "So, secondly, everything that you and I decide concerns only the two of us. All Jenny's promises are invalid. She's out of the game. Can you agree with this?" "Yes, Nick," she said meekly. "Now let's move on to number 3. You really hurt me, Angie. After what Jenny did, the last thing I wanted was to fall in love with someone else who was going to deceive me, you know?" "Of course, Nick, and I'm so ashamed." "Wait a minute. Did you say fall in love?" She looked at me and a smile appeared on her face. "Yes," I answered, smiling back at her. "Do you have problems with this?" "No, I don't have a problem with that." I looked at Davis and winked at him. He looked at Angie and me for a moment longer, enjoying our smiles, then waved at me and headed for the door. I walked over to Angela and carefully lifted her to her feet. "In that case, I think you owe me for a rather painfully interrupted evening." I kissed her, and she put her arms around my neck and hugged me tightly. Now you know how it's done, right? It is difficult to achieve justice with words alone. Kisses, tongues, clothes come off. She drags me onto the sofa. I'm not saying it was bad. In fact, I say it was great. It was amazing, especially the first time. I haven't been this excited since I was 16 and first touched Arlene Arnold's rather small breasts in the rec room. Well, actually, I was probably so excited too when I first had Jenny, but I'm sure I wasn't thinking about that at the moment. Anyway, Angie and I were naked on the couch within 2 minutes, and we made sex and love, kissed each other, whispered to each other, and there were tears on her cheeks, and it was like a real paradise. When we finished making love for the first time, and I'll be damned if it didn't feel like making love and not just sex, we lay together and smiled at each other. Then we got up, leaving our clothes on the floor, and I led her by the hand into the kitchen. We got out the sausage, the bread, the cheese, and the bottle of champagne that I had kept in the refrigerator for ages, long before Jenny left, and went upstairs to my real bedroom, the one in which I slept. And we went to bed, ate, drank, and laughed some more, enjoying the heady feeling that sharing a bottle of champagne can give. And then we did it a second time, and it was magical. We had long, slow, absolutely amazing sex. I vaguely remember doing this to Jenny in the early days of our relationship. Angie and I looked at each other, kissed. I put my head on her shoulder and kissed her neck. It was intimate and sweet, and much more like lovemaking than just sex. At these moments, everything except the joy of Angie's body was forgotten. I was happier than ever, and then we talked. It was backwards, you know, Angie, I told her. I was sitting on the bed with 2 pillows behind my back, and she was lying on top of me, resting her head on my chest, lazily playing with my hair. I mean, we did it, and now we have to talk about what it means. She suddenly pulled my chest hair hard and giggled when I yelped and pulled my hand away. Well, I don't think it will take long to talk about what it meant, at least to me. About? I said. Without looking up at me, she continued. For me, that meant that I was crazy about you, Nick. I started feeling it about the 3rd or 4th time we hung out together, and it got stronger and stronger. If it weren't for Jenny and my promise to her, if I'd only thought about myself, I would have gotten you into bed weeks ago. Now she sat up and looked me straight in the eyes. I don't want to tell you that I love you, but mostly because I don't want to scare you away. But I will tell you that you mean a lot to me, and I want you to know that. And she kissed me tenderly, looking seriously into my eyes. Okay, Angie, now it's my turn. I'm crazy about you too. But I'm also coming out of a pretty painful, destructive relationship, and I may still have some trust issues. She poked me in the ribs, and I spanked her ass. I know why you did it, and thank God that you stopped us that night and then were honest enough to explain everything to me. But it will take me time, maybe a lot of time, to feel like I can really trust you. It could have taken a long time after what Jenny did. But this nonsense about sleeping with me so Jenny can get me back. Listen, there's something you need to see. I got out of bed and pulled her out with me. Naked, holding hands, we walked down the corridor and stopped in front of the closed door of Jenny's and my old bedroom. There's some kind of shrine there that talks about how corrupt and evil I can be. You should not have any illusions about me. I opened the door and motioned for her to come in. Then I went back to bed and sat down, waiting for her to return. A few minutes later, Angie returned to the room with a serious face. Without saying a word, she climbed into bed and pressed herself tightly against me, squirming until we were pressed as tightly together as we could. She whispered into my shoulder, "I'm so sorry for what she did to you." Then she sat down. "And I'm so sorry for what I almost did to you. It just kills me that I could lose you that way." "Well, you didn't," I said hoarsely, and my throat suddenly tightened. "And if you play your cards right, you won't." I pulled her towards me and kissed her tenderly. At that moment, the damn phone rang. I muttered a curse and picked it up. "Hello? Hello, Mother. Look, I can't talk right now. I'll have to call you back." I smiled at Angie and hung up. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.